good morning, everyone. Welcome into Morning Invest on this Wednesday, July 8th, 2020. So glad to have you here on the show today. Coming up on the show, we're going to be talking about the stimulus, why we should be paying close attention to what Mitch McConnell says about $40,000, and will the stimulus be capped at $40,000? All signs are pointing to that, and we better pay close attention to it. A number of sources are now saying this is where it's going. We're going to be talking about that, plus all of the different plans right now that are being rolled out in the stimulus package, and why some members of the White House, former members of the White House, are saying, hey, look, these Republican members of Congress are just playing politics because it's election season. They're playing politics with people's hearts and minds around a stimulus. So we'll talk about that coming up on the show. We're also going to talk about PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program. We're getting more details this morning about the swampiness of Congress and members of the White House who took advantage of this Paycheck Protection Program. President Trump's friends, Mike Pence's friends, Nancy Pelosi's friends, Governor Gavin Newsom's friends. It's an equal opportunity swampiness this morning, and we're going to go through some of the people that took hundreds of thousands of dollars in loans that were meant for you. Oh, that really chaps me. I can't stand that. So these people who are billionaires taking these loans. We're also going to be talking this morning about going back to school. If you can believe it, we're almost ready to go back to school. And my little buddy Grover, who is so excited to be playing with our three kids on a regular basis, he's not going to know what to do anymore once these kids go back to school. But that's just a few weeks away. And are they ready? There's a lot of schools that are not going to reopen. Colleges are going to be doing some closed, some open, some half and half. What about retailers? So we're going to be looking at the economic impact of this, the parental impact of this, and the impact on kids. We're going to do a deep dive on back to school this morning, and how the president wants governors to reopen and get back to school. So all of that and more on today's show. I do want to make mention that our show today is brought to you by our friends over at Webull. You can get 2 free stocks. That's right. You can get 2 free stocks right now by going to morrisinvest.com/Webull. We'll have a link in the show description below. You should take advantage of this because the stock market continues to have record highs. And all you need to do is go to this website. Go to morrisinvest.com/Webull, and you'll get 2 free stocks. You just click on open an account right there. It's very, very simple. And you'll get you get a full Webull brokerage account. And what will happen is step 1, see right here, open a brokerage account. You receive a free stock valued between $2.50 up to $250. Then when you deposit that $100 as the next step, I'll scroll down a little bit further, then you'll get up to $1,400 with that second deposit of $100. So that's it. And you're not paying money, you're just putting $100 into the account, and you could close the account after that if you don't want to, sell your stocks, and you've made some money. So our thanks to Webull for supporting the show. And I want to check in with my little boy, the only co-host of a morning show who is a 4-month-old mini pincher. Grover, you ready for today's show? Let's do it. All right. Let's do it, shall we? I want to start today with the stimulus. I think this is the thing that's on everybody's mind right now, and we're getting some more granular details about what this thing will look like. And the reason I titled this video today, and the reason I talked about capping this at $40,000, is because we need to pay closer attention to what Mitch McConnell, Senate Majority Leader in Kentucky, had to say about the stimulus. Now, if you watched yesterday's show, you got a precursor to this. You saw a little bit of this. But now we had a number of sources come out and confirm that he didn't just say $40,000 for his health. No, he said $40,000 for a reason. So if you missed yesterday, Senator Mitch McConnell at his press conference talking about the next stimulus, here it is, and pay very close attention to what he says.
Senator, do you anticipate the next rescue package having any individual funding going to people like the previous $1,200 and to families? Will there be something like that?
Could well. I think the people who've been hit the hardest are people who make about $40,000 a year or less. Many of them work in the hospitality industry. The hospitality industry, as all of you know, just got rim-racked. Hotels, restaurants, and so that could well be a part of it.
Okay, very, very important. He went right to this number. So this is not just some sort of fantasy number here. So yesterday, Jeff Stein from the Washington Post spoke to a number of different sources and said we should be paying very close attention to that number. He said big news, he tweeted this, big news on stimulus checks today, that the GOP is eyeing much lower phase out for the next round of payments. That means that instead of that $75,000 we saw before, it's going to be lower. He says multiple sources say that McConnell didn't just throw out $40,000 as a cutoff haphazardly. Consensus within the Republican Party is moving that direction, which would sharply limit eligibility. Okay, let's dive into this a little bit further, folks. The big question, though, is how would that work? Because there's so many questions I have about that. But he didn't just throw that number out for a reason. That wasn't just like some sort of slip of the tongue. That was him dropping it in there because this falls in line with what Mitch McConnell and others have said about being more targeted. Now, you heard him say $40,000 and you heard him say hospitality industry. So those service areas, those waiters and hostesses at restaurants and other areas who've been crushed right now in the hotel industry, $40,000, perhaps if they fall under certain segments of the job population. But $40,000. So let's dive a little deeper in it. He said the $40,000 is in line with what Mitch McConnell has said for a more targeted approach in the next round of stimulus. And they're thinking about this sort of more surgical aid instead of just blindly sending out $1,200 to everybody. So how does this work? Because I'm confused how this would work. Let's see if we can all try to figure this out a little bit together. Let's just play this scenario out. $40,000 a year. So if you're sending checks out based on 2019's your income tax returns, then you're going to miss a lot of people. You're going to miss a lot of people who took a big economic hit this year. So you're just looking at last year again, which is what we did last time in the CARES Act. Well, we had a 3.5% unemployment rate in February. That didn't affect those people necessarily. People got crushed now in the year 2020, and I know it'll be a 2020 tax credit, but for a lot of people, they might not be able to reflect and show those numbers because their 2019 tax returns were higher. So what if someone was making $50,000, $60,000, but then took a massive decline in the beginning of this year? Well, then they wouldn't qualify. You follow me? So they wouldn't qualify under what Mitch McConnell is saying. If he's saying $40,000 is the cutoff in a tiered approach, well, what if someone's making $60,000, $75,000 a year, which we know is still not swimming in cash? I mean, that's lower middle class numbers right there. And if their job was cut and completely gone and that job's not coming back, those people now don't get a stimulus under this more targeted $40,000 cap from Republicans? Mick Mulvaney, who is a former White House acting chief of staff, thinks that people are just playing politics with this thing right now. And it's election season, and they want targeted things that would help them come re-election. Specifically, some of the things that are being talked about is the $4,000 tax credit to get out there and go on vacation, to spend time and money at hospitality industries and hotels and other places like that. Mick Mulvaney thinks that this is a joke. And look, he used to work in the Trump White House. He's another one of those employees that was let go, of course. So there's a long list of these guys who lost their job at the White House. But he's a Republican, and he thinks the Republican Party right now is just focused on election and is looking to win political points. Listen.
What is the priority in your view in terms of coming up with the next stimulus package?
Yeah, the priority is pretty much the calendar, which you're facing, obviously, is an election season into a recession, which is why we've gone fairly quickly from a consensus, sort of at least within Republicans, of let's wait and see to let's pass something, which is why you and I have talked about this before. We fully expect something to pass before the end of July. The only question is what. Passing something during July gives politicians a chance to go home during the fall and campaign with something to talk about. So something will pass. And the question is, what should it be?
That's the great question. What should it be? So economists have now sent a letter. Economists have sent a massive letter, and I think that this is fascinating. 156 economists have gotten together and sent a letter to Congress, calling on, basically echoing what we've heard from not only what we talked about yesterday, the international body of economists who said that the United States should not only not stop stimulus, not slow it down, and that includes the unemployment benefits, which are, of course, set to run out very, very soon, but step it up, just like the Federal Reserve Fed Chief Jerome Powell has been talking about. So this was an open letter. I'll have a link to it in the description below. You can read the full PDF if you want, but it's pretty fascinating. So let's go through some of the things in this letter, if we will. They're calling on Congress to make stronger food stamp programs, SNAP benefits extensions, robust child care funding for those people who are stuck at home, their jobs are lost, they have to also try to take care of their kids while at the same time trying to work, trying to make money while they're living at home. They also want ongoing programs for more direct cash payments to families. Extended and enhanced unemployment benefits also should be included. Enhanced unemployment benefits. But again, those are set to run out, of course. We saw that the members of the Republican Party want to get rid of those. Mitch McConnell and others, Labor Secretary Eugene Scalia, wants to get rid of that $600 a week bonus for unemployed workers. And members of this economic body are saying that poverty rates will increase in the second half of this year if they do not extend these unemployment benefits. And we see that in the data, that we were able to stay right around 12% in the poverty index. Had we not passed this stimulus, it would be upwards of 16 to 17%, according to economists. So the stimulus worked. Yes, thank you for that bell. The stimulus worked. The stimulus worked, folks, and this is why we need to be adding more money into the system again. They said we need to keep these in place until the economic conditions warrant their phase out. These economists went on to further say something I think is pretty amazing. Listen to this, and I don't know why no one's really been talking about this, which is, what about an automatic trigger? So this never happens again. Never happens again. Meaning that there would be some sort of drivers in place that if this ever happens again, automatic checks would go out to Americans if we had an unemployment rate of either 15 or 16% again. That if that happens, automatic payments would be sent out to Americans. It would be like an automatic, trigger mechanism, like we have on the stock market. This is a great idea. We have this in the stock market. That if trading gets out of hand and there's massive sell-off on the stock market floor on Wall Street, guess what happens? A trigger happens. We learned our lesson from the Great Depression, and it stops trading. We saw this happen a few times over the past few months, right? When all of these people were starting to panic and sell stuff off, there was a trigger. Well, what if the same thing worked for you and me? That if unemployment reaches a certain level, there's an automatic payment that goes out. Automatically keeps us afloat. We don't have to wait for Congress to wring its hands, play politics, go back and forth. Why didn't we not put an automatic trigger in place that sends out a direct check? I love this idea. Let me know in the comments below if you think this is a great idea. I think these economists are onto something. They're some smart folks. They want regular, lasting stimulus payments right now until we're below, 11% during the second quarter of this year, and continue to go down. They want regular, direct stimulus payments, $2,000 per month in direct stimulus payments to the American people per month until we reach a low rate around 5 or 6% unemployment again. What do you think about that? I think these economists are onto something. But when you have members of the Republican Party right now saying, nope, we're not getting anything, we're not doing these unemployment benefits extensions, no way, no how. We've heard it now from multiple members of the administration, Steven Mnuchin, Treasury Secretary. You've heard it from Mitch McConnell. We've heard it from Eugene Scalia, the Labor Secretary. We've heard it from other members of the Republican Senate. So the chances of this happening are probably not going to happen anytime soon. So what are some of the other stimulus plans that are being floated around right now? Well, one of the big stimulus plans, of course, is that $4,000, the vacation credit, the Explore America tax credit. This got Mick Mulvaney, the former acting White House Chief of Staff, a little hot under the collar about it. He thinks that this is just Republicans trying to play politics, although the president has supported this. A $4,000 hospitality tax credit, which would kind of line up with what Mitch McConnell's been talking about, the hospitality sector being hurt so hard. So Mick Mulvaney took on this particular question about the $4,000 go out there and vacation, go out there and don't social distance and just take a vacation. We're going to pay you a $4,000 tax credit.
We've not talked yet about this idea of giving people money to go on vacation, which sounds great, I guess, to some folks. But if folks aren't going on vacation because they're afraid of getting sick, giving them money to go on vacation isn't going to solve the problem. So I'm hopeful that what's going on Capitol Hill right now is trying to figure out a way to fashion a stimulus that actually helps us solve the reason we're in this recession in the first place, which is solving COVID.
Yeah, solving COVID, not giving people a 50% tax credit for going on vacation. But this is a proposal. So parts of this could come together as one of the pieces of the stimulus. Let me tell you what it is further. This would give you a 50% of your travel-related expenses. It would be able to be deducted on your tax return, a maximum of up to $4,000 per year. Or, in other words, if you're traveling, you could spend $8,000 and get half of that credited back to you. $8,000, you get $4,000 back. It would apply to things like airfare, hotels, lodging, recreation, restaurants, and other things. It would also apply to those people going to their second homes. So this is like a nice little tax credit for the rich, that if you went to your second home, you could actually use this as part of the expense. If you're going to go vacation there and spend time there, this would fall under that tax credit. So just another good old stimulus for the wealthy. Third, we have this next stimulus check, and whether or not we'll get $1,200. So now, if we're listening to what Mitch McConnell has said about the $40,000 cap, will this $1,200? Will we see a $1,200 credit go out to those people making $40,000 or less? And will that be the new cap? We still don't know any details about the numbers on this. Will there be a $500 dependent credit, $1,200 for dependents, or will this be phased down lower? We don't know yet. So Republicans seem to be really going backwards on this amount of money that they would want to spend, or the cap at the amount of people that they would get these checks in the first place. But I think it's very clear that $40,000 is going to be the cap if Republicans get their way. Multiple sources now saying that this is the case. Mitch McConnell didn't just say that for his health. So those are some of the big ones. We also have the payroll tax cut, which could put about 7.65% or so back in your paycheck. So if you are working, this is something the president wants, of course, is that payroll tax cut. So you would get a larger paycheck, about a 7% increase in what you're already making. So that would be good news for those people that have a job. Doesn't take into account the people that don't have a job right now. And of course, the other one is the big infrastructure spending. This, again, I don't think has an immediate stimulus to the economy. There's been a number of experts, even who weighed in during Obama's terms. There were a number of Republicans who said this does not help us right now. We won't see the benefits of this for years to come. And by the way, it's going to be all these cronies getting money, right? All these crony capitalism, all these different companies getting big contracts for infrastructure projects. So infrastructure, great, we need it, but I don't believe it's really tied to any meaningful stimulus that's going to jumpstart our economy right now. But again, all of these things are on the table, and all of these things are pointing towards re-election time. So I think Mick Mulvaney is absolutely right that this stuff is perfectly geared right now to help win, get people back to winning elections. And going back home to their districts in the fall when they get their fall break before campaign season, they're able to say, hey, look, I brought $12 million to this hospital. And if you don't believe me, by the way, that's exactly what Mitch McConnell did yesterday. That's exactly what he did at his press conference. He stood there in multiple different hospitals and said, here in Kentucky, this hospital that I'm standing in got $12 million in stimulus money. And he looked around at everyone and shook his head like, I brought that to you. I did that. That's what these guys do. They want to go back home and they want to take a victory lap and they want to talk about how much money they brought back home. It's what they always do. So of course, this stimulus right now is geared towards re-election. I know, Grover's not happy about it, and neither am I, but that's the way it is. That's the way politics works. Don't be surprised. Don't be alarmed. That's just the way it happens. So let's talk now about these PPP swampy Paycheck Protection Program numbers. And we've gotten some more data now because since Monday's release of the list of businesses that received loans, we've seen a lot of outrage. There's been a lot of outrage around the companies and friends and cozy partners of President Trump, Vice President Mike Pence, and Democrats, Nancy Pelosi, Governor Gavin Newsom, and others who all had family, friends, relatives that seemed to take advantage of this PPP program, and not just at a $150,000 level, no, anywhere between $350,000 on up to millions that they received thanks to cozy relationships with members of the White House and Congress. So let's start with President Trump, since he's the leader of the free world. What did he get? Well, he had a bunch of people that took some advantages of his cozy relationships. He had multiple businesses tied to President Trump. So they had, let's see, the Trump Organization specifically, and President Trump, as well as other financial support for his 2016 run for president, his inauguration. So people that donated to his inauguration, people who helped facilitate his campaign, people who donated millions to advertisements for the Trump administration, as well as the Trump Organization, many of them. So an analysis done by the Associated Press shows that as much as $273 million was loaned to more than 100 companies that are owned or operated by donors to Trump. I'm going to repeat that. $273 million was loaned to more than 100 companies that are owned or operated by donors to Trump. That's a fact. How does that sit with you? Let me know in the comments how that sits with you. Here's one. I'll read a few of them. J.H. Palmer Associates. It's a real estate firm run by longtime Trump backer Jeffrey Palmer. That's Geoff, Jeffrey Palmer. They were approved for a loan. The company is listed as G.H. Palmer on the list of loans that was distributed. It got upwards of $350,000 to $1 million for his real estate firm in Beverly Hills, California. They were approved for a loan. And guess what? Palmer gave at least $4 million to a pro-Trump super PAC called America First Action. Desert Development, here's another one, Desert, D-E-Z-E-R, Development, which is a real estate company founded by Michael Desert. It says on its website it has the same address as the Trump International Beach Resort in Miami, Florida. They do what's called a branded real estate portfolio, and they include 6 Trump-branded towers that they own. Desert got between $350,000 up to $1 million from the PPP program. Then there's the White Stallion Energy Company. It's a coal mining company out of Indiana. It's owned by Stephen Chancellor. The coal executive reportedly met with the former EPA chief Scott Pruitt to discuss softening the pollution laws. White Stallion gave $175,000 to Trump's inaugural committee. So that's nice, you know. You pay him up. I'll scratch your back, you scratch mine. He also was seen shaking hands with President Trump, along with Indiana Senator Mike Braun, when they visited the state back in 2018. And they got between $5 million and $10 million in PPP loans. These are stimulus dollars, by the way, folks, that were meant for small businesses to keep people on their payroll and keep the lights on in their businesses. There's multi-millionaires that receive these PPP loans. Mitch McConnell. We talked about this yesterday. Mitch McConnell and his wife's family business, Elaine Chao, she's the Department of Transportation Secretary Elaine Chao, they received up to $350,000 in loans set aside for companies who are struggling from coronavirus. And it's not just Trump, it's not just Mitch McConnell, it's Democrats too. Governor of California, Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom is tied to a winery that received money. The list goes on. How about Robert De Niro, Hollywood celebrity? Robert De Niro, forget it, like he needs help. Robert De Niro has Nobu restaurants, about like 12 different locations, I believe, got stimulus money. I'm not sure the exact number, but there were a number of the Nobu restaurants from Robert De Niro that got PPP loans. And there was also a firm linked to Nancy Pelosi that got PPP loans. So the swampiness, let's talk about draining the swamp, shall we? Let's drain the swamp in Washington. We heard so much about draining the swamp. When you have over 100 different Trump donors that got cushy PPP loans, it's no wonder that the Treasury Secretary, Steven Mnuchin, didn't want to release this information. He had to be pushed by Democrats to release it. Well, let's be honest, it didn't shine too good a light on some Democrats as well as some Republicans. It was an equal opportunity offender of people taking advantage of these PPP loans. So the swampiness persists in Washington, folks. But we heard so much about President Trump was going to drain the swamp. You know, hundreds of his friends managed to get $273 million in Paycheck Protection loans. That's right, Grover. Can you believe that? Yeah. This is the swampiness of Washington right now, folks. Unbelievable. Oh. What do you guys think about that? What do you guys think about that in the chat? Politicians are stealing. Greg Baker says politicians stealing our kids' wealth. Yeah. Kathleen Goodish says vote them all out. You know, this is what happens to these entrenched members of Congress. A lot of this stuff doesn't really happen when you're first-term members of Congress. You have some, but when you're there and you're an entrenched member of Congress, like Mitch McConnell and others, you've got a machine that just pumps money into this system and just keeps you there, you know. And so you rub their elbows, you scratch their back, they scratch yours constantly. This is what happens. This is exactly what happens. So, you know, this is where you need to write to members of Congress, demand that these, people return this money that should not have accepted it in the first place. We saw the outrage when Shake Shack and TGI Fridays and other companies, big companies that shouldn't have been accepting this money, returned the money after there was a lot of outrage about it. So why shouldn't we do the same thing here? And now this is what bothers me so much, because we want to get rid of this. So it's okay for this to happen, where we can get rid of unemployment benefits at $600 a week to help people stave off poverty when their jobs are lost. But it's totally fine for this to happen, where he's allowed to then get, his family's allowed to get PPP money upwards of $350,000 up to $1 million. We don't know the exact amounts, but he was in that category. Like, that's okay. The double standard is the thing, like I've said it before, I'll say it again, that absolutely chaps my you-know-what. Swampy swamp pants. Swampy swamp pants McSwamperson. Oh, all right. Let's talk about back to school. It's back to school time. Can you believe that, folks? In just a few weeks, some people will be going back to school. Others will still be trying to figure out if they're going to be going back to school, because they are not getting information yet from their schools. So I wanted to look at a deep dive here at back to school, what it's going to mean for our economy, our parents, and our kids. What did we learn from being locked down? What is the data showing us? And what will the data show us going forward to be able to get our kids back in some semblance of normalcy as we move into this fall semester? So going back to school is going to look a lot different. I mean, absolutely going to look a lot different. And a lot of the different reports are pointing to a lot of different anxiety right now in the retail space. 66% of parents right now are anxious about sending their kids back to school. A lot of it obviously stems from COVID-19. Also, it stems from them not sure if they're able to pay for the schooling that they thought they would be able to, from a lack of work, hours cut. And so sending my kids back, it's not just about their health. What we're seeing in this anxiety, according to this new Deloitte report, is that by sending them back, they're worried that that kid goes back to school, but I'm older, so they bring it home to me. They bring it home to me because people aren't properly socially distanced. And I heard one doctor say, look, the issue could be that you go to school, you come home, you've got a grandparent that you see on the weekends who might be going through some sort of chemotherapy treatment or some other thing where they're not able to get sick at all. They get sick at all, it's game over. Lights out, you've killed that person by spreading a virus to that person. That is a lot of the anxiety among parents right now, is not only the economic impact, but whether or not this virus will be cleaned up and safe for these kids to return. Let's talk about some of the colleges, for instance, and particularly Harvard. Harvard is getting a big backlash this morning because of the way that they are announcing their plans to reopen. So I'm curious where you come down on Harvard right now. Harvard University said on Monday that they will welcome freshmen and some other students to campus this fall semester. You can come back to campus, you can come back to Harvard, but they're going to be teaching classes online. So you can come back to campus and live in the dorm, so you can kind of be part of the Harvard experience, but you're not actually going to go to classes and meet face-to-face with teachers? why go? I mean, I get the benefit, I guess, of getting out of the house, and you want to free up ability for your parents to maybe get back to work. They don't have to babysit you as much anymore. I get that piece of it. But why even, you want to go back to a dorm? Dorms are like where the worst possible spot to be right now. I mean, you end up having fraternities. That's right, Grover. You have fraternities, which we saw a report this past week where 100% of the fraternity members contracted coronavirus in the fraternity house. 100% of them. You want to go back to that environment, a dorm room, where everyone's closed in like that? No, thank you. So Harvard, though, is getting hit big time because they're not going to lower their tuition at all. So it costs $49,000 to go to Harvard. $49,000 to go to Harvard. And Harvard said, nope, we're not going to lower our tuition. And to me, this just throws it all open, doesn't it? This just goes to show you that the reason that Harvard's not lowering their tuition is because they realize it's just a status play. It's just the name. That the education is going to be inferior, that you're just paying for a name. That's it. By me getting Harvard on my diploma, I'm paying $50,000 to get that diploma per that semester, so I can just have Harvard on my resume. That's it. It just shines a light on how much garbage we're saddling our kids with right now with these massive student loan bills and student loan debts just so we can put the prestige of having this name on our diploma. When in fact, a lot of the universities like the City College of New York, a lot of the state-run systems in Pennsylvania and others are really the areas where you're able to take people like working class individuals and lift them up and move them out of poverty and give them a chance at a trade, a skill that actually gets them into the workforce at a much lower cost. I still think American schools are way too overpriced, and it's saddling young people with a massive amount of student loan debt when they shouldn't. Just look at other countries around the world that subsidize their education. They have a better education system than America does. The university system is highly targeted. They don't waste 2 years repeating classes they took in high school. They get a better education, and it's almost free. Almost every country is free. Go to Europe, for instance. You can go to the Netherlands and pay I think it's like €1,000 for the whole year. A better education in the United States. And for a fraction of the cost, a fraction of it. You're more likely to get a higher paying job as a result of it. So we already know that online learning, the environment failed. It was mostly a failure. Now, there were some parents, of course, that pulled it off and did a good job of sort of supplementing what they were being taught at their school level. And to those parents, way to go. I know my wife was fantastic at it. I was working, so I didn't get to spend as much time in that environment as my wife did. She did an amazing job with it, and she should be commended. I've talked to other families who their families have done amazing as well, supplementing that, but many couldn't. Many were not in a position to be able to do that. Many people had to work from home and had to be working just as hard as if they were in the office, and they didn't have time to also be teaching fractions. And then for other schools, they also didn't have the ability to have internet access. There over 12% of students this year, because of the pandemic, didn't have access to the internet. And those schools in poverty, those kids that were in poverty that didn't have access to internet, they had to get in the car. Okay, this is amazing. They had to get in the car. Those schools set up Wi-Fi bus hotspots in the parking lot. They drove to those parking lots, sat next to the bus in their own car, and got Wi-Fi access in next to the bus. And they would have to sit there for hours and do their homework and do their online learning while the parents sat there in the car with them for hours. How miserable does that sound? So now I get part of this infrastructure plan that President Trump has been talking about includes rural broadband. Great. The United States is woefully behind the times. We need rural broadband across America if we want to be a leader in the global economy. There should be no part of our country that does not have access to the internet, for crying out loud. What is this, 1992? Come on. This is exactly something we should have access to. New York City, let's talk about New York City. New York City has 0 plans to reopen this fall. 0. That's 1.1 million students. We already know the benefits and what happened during this. Only 43% of parents polled by Deloitte felt that the recent at-home education that their child received was adequate. or even prepared them for the next grade level. So the online learning was mostly a disaster. Many teachers weren't prepared for it, didn't like it. Many students weren't really interactive at all with it. Parents also were saddled with trying to not only work from home and do the things they had to do, but also then try to play teacher. We thank our teachers more than ever now. We realize how important that job is, and they should be woefully paid. They're woefully underpaid. But now talk of keeping them home for a whole nother year. So New York, Governor Andrew Cuomo says, I have no intention of sending people back to school in New York City. 1.1 million students. And that's not the only areas. Schools all across the country, colleges and others right now are saying we might go half and half virtual, half come back. President Trump isn't having any of that. He's calling on governors and he's basically forcing them, you better reopen in the fall or else.
We hope that most schools are going to be open. We don't want people to make political statements or do it for political reasons. They think it's going to be good for them politically, so they keep the schools closed. No way. So we're very much going to put pressure on governors and everybody else to open the schools, to get them open. And it's very important. It's very important for our country. It's very important for the well-being of the student and the parents. So we're going to be putting a lot of pressure on open your schools in the fall.
Open the schools in the fall. I don't know about the political thing. I haven't heard any governor saying that they're going to try to keep a school closed because of trying to win political points right now. Governors know how important it is for schools to reopen and get kids back in that environment again. It's incredibly important. Dr. Scott Gottlieb talked about that and talked about going back to school and whether or not he's a former FDA commissioner and what's going to happen if we don't get these kids back to school. He thinks it's very important.
But you're really not going to be able to restart the economy until you're able to open the schools more fully. I think the way to achieve that is to try to get resources into the schools that they can use to better protect the teachers in particular and also the children, proper PPE, protective equipment for the teachers, testing in schools. Different school districts are looking at testing. I also think it's important to give local discretion to districts, give the districts discretion to make decisions based on their local infrastructure. There may be schools where you can't properly distance, crowded schools that don't have the same physical infrastructure, where they might want to go to a schedule where they have 1 or 2 days of distance learning and 1 or 2 or 3 days of in-classroom learning. That might be appropriate for certain districts where you see a lot of spread and certain schools just don't have the same infrastructure and resources as others. So giving discretion to local districts to make decisions based on what their resources are and what the local situation is, I think is going to be important to keeping schools open this fall.
Yeah, Grover agrees. I think it's a good idea. It could make sense. Could make sense. I just think, how difficult is it going to be? You're going to have, and I think the problem with that sort of hodgepodge approach, like I agree with the doctor in part, that you should give local discretion because you're seeing certain hotspots across the country right now. So would the same things apply, in Montana with seeing a huge spike in cases as it does in Minnesota, or Alaska as it does in Florida, or Texas, which is seeing off the charts cases in Arizona and so forth. Texas and Houston and other parts, a lot of young people, and that's the part of the problem right now is so many young people. So I don't know that that's the answer because, other countries have been able to flatten the curve and get things under control by having a unified approach to this thing. So you're going to have some school districts that are open, spreading virus, and then others that are closed. And how do you keep it all under one roof and keep it contained? I don't think that you can do it that way. I did see a story this morning. School districts have bought up miles and miles of plastic, I don't know, what do you call it? Plastic screens, that we've seen now at restaurants and storefronts and things like that when you're checking out, the big plastic plexiglass, that's the word I'm looking for. So you're going to just see schools now just covered in plexiglass. I'm sure in front of the teachers' desks, maybe there'll be plexiglass put up. Maybe students will sit inside of plexiglass cubicles, so they'll be inside of a little cube. That's always hot and sticky too. Like, do you want to sit like that and learn? So, I'd much rather, if I have to live like that, and I have to sit there in a mask, and I have to sit behind plexiglass, and I can't, and I'm constantly worried about that to me is also a bit of a distraction. I'd much rather have the ability to maybe learn online and have a more controlled environment. We're seeing retail spending right now also declining. So this is a big concern on the economy and retail spending. So people are not going to Old Navy. They're not going to the Gap. They're expecting huge declines in retail spending as it relates to clothing and back to school items. Just as a curiosity, let me know in the comments how many of you right now are planning to buy back to school items that include clothing or things like that. In fact, according to the story, according to reports this morning, we're seeing that parents plan to spend most of their money on online communication and computers, so that the amount of money they're going to spend in the economy is going to be buying a computer, beefing up their internet, making sure that their children have adequate access to technology, as opposed to buying some graphic t-shirts at Old Navy and new jeans and backpacks, because that's not where the money's going to be. So Gap is already taking a big punch to the stomach, and this is hurting malls big time. But according to reports, Target and Best Buy and Walmart could see a nice increase in the amount of spending by people going back to school buying computers, calculators, and other electronic equipment that could help them work and learn from home right now as we enter this fall. So that's the very latest on back to school. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of this. Please leave me a comment below. And thank you so much for smashing that like button. Many of you have asked, how do I smash the like button? It's very simple to do. It's right underneath where you're watching me. There's an up and down thumb. Please hit the up one. Please, I really appreciate that. That really helps. And I do want to make mention again, our show sponsor, our friends over at Webull. You can take access right now to their website. Go to morrisinvest.com/Webull. We'll have a link below. So you can take advantage of this, where you get 2 free stocks valued up to $1,400 for free. For free. All you need to do is go to their website, go to Webull or go to our website here, the link, and then that's how you get access to that money. Otherwise, you don't get it if you don't use this link. You get 2 free stocks when you open their brokerage account. And since Wall Street is going up and up and up and up, you get this free stock, and then it keeps going up in value, which is super nice. So then all you need to do is, number one, you open your brokerage account with them, and you get a free stock valued between $2 and up to $250. And then you deposit $100 in the account to activate the account. You're not spending it, you're just putting $100 in there. And it gives you up to $1,400 in free stock once you do that $100 deposit. So that's just for our audience. This is not available anywhere else, just for our audience. And so we thank them very much for their support of Morning Invest. Thank you guys so much. So please check that out. I really appreciate that.